Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Burn the Rule Book podcast. This is the podcast where we break down everything you were never taught about menopause, mental health, and relationships one truth at a time. I'm Rachel Boyle, a licensed couples therapist, sex therapist, and certified menopause specialist. This podcast helps you understand what is actually happening to your body, mind, and relationships, and gives you real tools to move through life with clarity, calm, and connection. Let's get started. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Burn the Rule Book podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about why boys have a tendency to lose their feelings and girls have a tendency to lose their voice, and then we call it relationship problems. So we're going to go straight back to the classroom because long before we're adults trying to do communication skills, we were kids learning what was allowed. And the researcher on this, her name is Carol Gilligan, and she's done a lot of work in this area. Carol Gilligan highlights something that's easy to miss if we only look at adult relationships. And that is little boys often start out emotionally tuned in, relational, and curious. And little girls often start out direct, outspoken, and surprisingly clear about fairness and what's not okay. So she actually did research in the classrooms, and she would go into the elementary schools, and in kindergarten, the little boys were just as loving, warm, connective, communicative, speaking about emotions, as much so, and maybe even more than the girls were. And the girls were outspoken, saying what they liked. They were clear and straight to the point. Now you fast forward to third grade and the little boys are no longer doing those behaviors. It has been trained right out of them. And the girls are now starting to do people pleasing, wondering what other people are going to think about them, being less direct and more confused about things. So this is something we can tie all the way back to our cultural conditioning. So because patriarchy is a training system, both genders get shaped. Boys learn that connection is dangerous, feelings are weakness, and tenderness costs them. It costs them status. They get made fun of. They get teased. Now, girls learn that being too direct costs belonging, and it also costs them relationships because they're viewed as being too much or unlikable. And as humans, we're relational beings, and so we want to fit in and be a part of. So at a very young age and on an unconscious level, these relational traits get trained out of each gender. Now, if you zoom out, right, and you're looking at this from a bird's eye view, you can see what's going to happen to boys and girls as adults coming from a mile away. And we see this a lot in heterosexual relationships. And that is men struggle to identify, tolerate, and speak emotions, especially vulnerable ones. And women struggle to hold a clear voice that's both powerful and soft without either getting angry and complaining or shrinking or apologizing or over explaining. So this really isn't a personality issue for people. It's really an understanding of the developmental history that goes into boys and girls learning different things because of our culture. So what Carol Gilligan calls this is voice training. This is our internal voice, how we learn to be in the world based on the feedback that we get from others around us. And one of the most useful frames from her work is that development isn't simply how we grow, it's also how culture teaches us to split off parts of ourselves to stay acceptable. And this shows up as a loss of voice or a crisis of connection, especially as kids move from childhood to the peer culture and status. So in school, there's always a hidden curriculum running that most everyone is not aware of. It's happening right alongside math and reading. And that is who gets interrupted, who gets laughed at, who gets praised for being confident versus punished for being bossy, who gets social rewards for toughness. And that hidden curriculum is where this cultural conditioning called patriarchy becomes real. Not as an idea, but as behavioral conditioning. So boys in kindergarten are relational, they're tender, emotionally available until they learn that it's not safe. And this piece is critical. So, as I said earlier, many boys start with this emotional access and relational sensitivity, and then something changes as they start to identify masculinity norms and they begin to harden emotionally. So Gilligan and her colleagues, their broader argument expanded through later work on boys, and she described boys being pushed toward a masculine ideal that's defined against the feminine. Against the feminine means that boys at some point along the way after kindergarten decide they don't want to be like girls. The feminine is bad. So you'll hear this in like a don't cry like a girl, or you're being too emotional, or don't be a P, you know, the rest of that word. But this creates a split between what boys know internally and what they're allowed to show externally. And this split happens on an unconscious level. So they learn it's not safe for me to have soft emotional feelings. So if a boy is too soft or too sensitive, he gets made fun of in our culture. And he notices the dynamics and he learns it's safer to act like he doesn't care. It's safer for him to act like he doesn't care. And he learns that showing longing, hurt, fear, or tenderness can cost him status, meaning that he'll get made fun of or teased at by the other boys. So he trades emotional intimacy for approval. Now remember, boys are doing this on an unconscious level. They don't realize that it's happening because as humans, we're wired for connection. So we want to be part of the group. And so that trade that little boys are making doesn't disappear. It now grows into adulthood. And that emotional, soft, intimate part of boys gets orphaned off, meaning they don't even have access to it anymore on a conscious level. They are just acting from what they've been allowed to know, which those main emotions for men can be anger, sarcasm, or like this sexuality piece. So their adult version is that like, I really don't know how to feel. I don't know how to access those soft emotions. Or if someone asks them how they're doing, okay, well, I'm fine, right? But not really giving any emotional language to what I'm fine means to their partner. And, you know, this anger, which is really the only emotion they're allowed to show, but has like these sub emotions to it, which is the withdrawal, the sarcasm, the defensiveness. They show that because it's too vulnerable for them to access their real emotions. And by too vulnerable, meaning that they didn't really learn how to do it. So that vulnerability feels really uncomfortable and even dangerous to them. It can, in fact, feel like humiliation. Now, this does not mean that men are broken because boys are trained to abandon emotional language to say acceptable in their patriarchal peer culture. It just means that they haven't learned it. And just because you didn't learn something in childhood, that doesn't mean that you can't learn about it in adulthood. Like we all know that the brain has neuroplasticity. So all these things that we unconsciously either learned or didn't learn, you can now learn it in adulthood. It just may take it a little bit longer, and you also have more intention around learning it. So now to the girls. The girls in elementary school are outspoken, they're leadership ready until it becomes risky. So what they found is that many women recognize this in their bones, that girls who are clear and outspoken around early adolescence, they go silent or they default to I don't know. Not because they suddenly got less intelligent, but because they started tracking the social cost of honesty. So when girls are direct and honest, they are punished by our society, by our culture. They are told that they are too much, they're too loud, that they're not likable, that they're called the B word, right? When boys exhibiting the same traits are called brave and courageous and great leadership skills. So this is all part of the patriarchy. It just shows up differently with girls than boys. So girls learn to be agreeable. They learn not to be too much, not to make others uncomfortable. And don't challenge male authority too directly because that's going to upset the males. And don't lead in a way that looks like dominance. So instead of losing feelings, girls end up over explaining, softening every request with the words just or maybe or sorry, over apologizing, difficulty naming their needs directly, and also the fear of being seen as harsh, mean, dramatic, or too intense. And you'll see this a lot of times, like, girls are like, "Oh, I am an easy girlfriend," right? Like, you don't want to be labeled as having too much drama. And so they will collapse into themselves and not say what is truly meaningful for them to be accepted by society. So girls will unconsciously try to keep the emotional connection by keeping themselves small. So this is the double bind. Boys lose their feelings and girls lose their voice. And then we call this whole dynamic communication issues in relationships. But here's the real punchline. If boys are trained out of emotional fluency and girls are trained out of a direct voice, then adult couples often land in this predictable trap. She's trying to make contact and name what's happening. He's trying to avoid shame and failure and emotional exposure. So she escalates to be heard. He withdraws to stay safe, and they both end up feeling alone. Now, Gilligan's lens helps us to see that this isn't men being avoidant and women being needy. It's really a socialized collision of two people trained by the same patriarchy, but they each got completely different messages. So neither gender got the whole message. They're each only working off half of the information. So, how this shows up in the body and why intimacy is hard, even when love is there, is because adult intimacy requires two things at once. It requires the emotional access, the feeling words, the vulnerability, the authenticity, the soft emotions, plus a clear, embodied expression of voice without collapsing or attacking. So, patriarchy disrupts both of those things that are needed for true intimacy. So this is really important. I'm going to say this again because true intimacy requires emotional access, feeling words, vulnerability, soft emotions, and a clear embodied voice, the ability to express without collapsing or attacking. And patriarchy disrupts both. Men can struggle with identifying and naming internal states because they were rewarded for disconnecting. So they have a hard time even finding those emotional states in their body. Not only were they rewarded for disconnection, it wasn't emotionally safe. They were punished for actual connection. And women can struggle with holding power and softness because they were also made fun of or punished or ridiculed for asserting, and they were rewarded for caretaking, for being selfless, for putting themselves last. So couples end up with a sex life or a relational life that's functional, but it's not really emotionally intimate because neither party has learned the other half of the book that they didn't get in childhood. And all of this is reinforced by all of our cultural norms, fantasy books, our movies, the billboards. And so it's literally steeped inside of us at such a deep depth that we don't even realize it. So conflict cycles end up feeling unsolvable. Couples can either get really escalated in their conflict, or they can feel like a roommate situation where things have just gone cold. And this is why it matters, because this attachment and attunement dance starts at such a young age. Now, the repair process is teaching how to have voice with vulnerability. This is what's known as relational skills. And the good news is that what's been conditioned in the past can be reconditioned, right? So for men or the partner socialized to shut down feelings. Because, see, women can embody unhealthy masculine traits, and men can embody unhealthy, what we call feminine traits, right? So men can get too soft and too complaining and all these other things, right? And women can become too aggressive, right? So they can embody each other's traits because it's all part of the patriarchy. So men can shut down, women can shut down, men can become verbally aggressive, and so can women. So for the shut down person, name one feeling, not a dissertation, right? It's important to be able to build up a space of thriving for vulnerability without flipping into shame or defensiveness. So try one sentence structure like, the feeling underneath my irritation is a soft feeling. It's I'm worried, or I have fear, or I am sad. So those have soft feelings versus anger, irritation. Those are like power over. Those are really harsh feelings. Another example is what I'm afraid you'll think of me is, or the story I'm making up about this is blank, right? I'm worried that you'll think that I'm not worthy. I'm worried that you'll think that I am not enough. That's soft, direct language. And what I need right now is blank. So when you say what I need right now, it's a request offered to your partner in a soft, powerful, hearable way that gives your partner the information to help meet your needs. So this is relational intimacy training, right? Intimacy just isn't about sex. It's about our intellectual and our emotional connection and transparency. So for women or the partner with the soft voice, the work is not to be nicer. It's to say the clean truth without lots of apologizing or without meanness or escalation. So to hold power without aggression and to hold softness without collapsing inwards. So you might try saying, here's what I feel. Here's what I would like. And here's what I am not available for. And then just stop. No courtroom closing statement, no over justifying, no over explaining. That's all of that training that we get as little girls to try to get people to understand what we're thinking. And so for the couples work, the shared work is in creating this biosphere between the two of you where feelings aren't punished, where truth isn't punished, and vulnerability and repair and a process for repair is normal. Because the whole point is your relationship can become the place where patriarchy stops. So I'd like you to think back to school. And what did you learn to hide to stay accepted? Did you have to hide your feelings, your confidence, your leadership? Did you have to hide your tenderness? Did you have to hide your softness? What do you still do today to manage that old risk that you learned? What are you still doing to hide the softness or to hide the harshness? And what would intimacy look like if you didn't have to perform these roles? Just notice, no shame. This is just data, just for you to go inside and to notice what's going on with you internally. So if you're an adult struggling with intimacy, this episode is your reminder that it didn't start in your relationship. It started way before you got into this relationship. It started when you were a kid. Boys were taught to disconnect from their hearts, and girls were taught to disconnect from their voices. And when we wonder why being close feels so hard, because your work individually and relationally is to reclaim what was shoved down and what you unconsciously hid, which is emotional fluency, having a clear voice, power with warmth, softness without harshness. So thank you again for joining me today. If this episode resonated with you, save it, share it with a friend who you think needs to hear this or would benefit from it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you found something helpful, validating, or just a little more human in our conversation. Remember, while I'm a licensed therapist, I'm not your therapist, and I'm not a medical doctor. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical or mental health advice. For personalized care, please consult with a licensed healthcare provider or mental health professional trained in the area you're seeking support. You deserve expert guidance that's tailored just for you.